All right, so we're here for our second session today. If you didn't join us on the first one, I'm going to do a short recap, and then we are going to jump into our focus of today's training, which is inhibitory control. So just very briefly, in case you're new to the Katie and Alana show, which, what have you been missing the last couple weeks? I just want to take a moment and we're going to introduce ourselves. My name's Katie Mosley. I have been with the IEPTA Center for a little over 3 years now. I taught middle school English for about 18 years before I joined the center, and I am also a school psychologist. Alana, go ahead and just do a quick little intro.
Yep. Hi, I'm Alana Harvith. I taught in the classroom for 18 years as a special education teacher. That is my lens. And then I was a coordinator or a case manager for a couple of years before I joined the center at the IEPTA Center. So I was able to facilitate IEP meetings and have like IEP compliance, things like that. So my lens is special education and Katie is gen ed. So that's why we kind of do this together. We know all students have executive functioning needs, whether they have IEPs or not. So that's a little bit about
For
me.
sure. And we, like Alana and I mentioned, we work for the IEP Technical Assistance Center. This little blurb is just the official blurb from our website about what we do and why we exist. Really, we serve adults working with kids in schools to improve outcomes for students with disabilities, but we know that that really improves outcomes for all students. So don't think that you're only here to learn something about our students with special needs. I promise that there are going to be things that you can take away from this training today that will transfer into every student who you see, and you will even start to be able to identify some things in yourself and probably those around you as well. So today, just a few learning outcomes that we have for you. I hope that by the end of this training, you will be able to define inhibition. You can probably do that now, but just in case you can't, you should be able to do that by the end of today's training. We're going to take a look at how inhibition affects students in the classroom. And then probably the part that people are most looking forward to is just learning about some strategies and interventions that we can use to assist our students with inhibition. So here is the Padlet link again. If you haven't been with us, this might be the first time that you're seeing this Padlet link. Alana, can you also throw that in the chat in case anyone wants to pull it up? You will notice one difference if you pulled it up last time from pulling it up this time, and that should be in the very first column in the Padlet. It will have 2 PowerPoint presentations. The one on top is the presentation from our first session, and the second one is today's PowerPoint. So one thing that I noticed on some of the evaluation feedback was that people had wished they had the presentation. So I wanted to be sure that you had it today. And before the next session, I will get our third PowerPoint posted. So if you want it ahead of time, just check back a couple of days before our training and it should be there. I'm working on just trying to get those updated and updating a few other things in the Padlet as well, just so that we can have the most current information available for everyone. So as we go through this, Alana and I really would like you guys to utilize the chat to interact with us. You can unmute and ask questions also. We don't mind if you do that either. If you don't want to interrupt, but you have a question, you can just use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, and you can find that when you click on let me find it so I can tell you my thing went away. For whatever reason, my toolbar went away. Alana, can you see how you can raise your hand on the chat? feature. Oh, my toolbar came back.
Oh, yes.
Okay, no, it's gone now.
Well, let me see. Can you guys see a little waving? Or you could even just, let's see, where is the wave? Normally you have it on your thing, right? And next to you.
I know, that's how I am like, what the heck is going on?
Can anyone find it? Because I don't see it. It's under React. Thank you. Perfect. Love it. Okay. It's under oh, I see, under the heart. So does React with a little heart at the bottom of the toolbox? Thank you. I thought it was somewhere else. Appreciate that. And it says raise hand or be right back or any sort of thing like that. Thank you,
Yep.
Marissa.
And if you raise your hand, then Alana can see it, and Alana can interrupt me instead of you, if you're more comfortable that way. It's perfect with us. All right, so today we're going to talk about the first of the three basic components of executive function, and that is inhibition. So when we talk about executive function, we have to talk about these three areas first, because these are the hallmarks, the foundation of executive function. One other note that I wanted to make about some of the evaluation feedback, and that was, you guys gave some really great feedback, so I'm so appreciative. It was so varied. There were people who wrote, please give more things specific to preschool and early elementary, and some that said, please give more specific information for high school. So I feel like we're all over the place. So I'm going to try to give broad general examples, but if you want more specific to a particular age range, please feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to send you more information, or I'm even happy to hop on a Zoom with you. I know Alana would do the same, just so that maybe we can give you a little more targeted support for a particular age group if we don't hit on it. We do want to be sure that this is valuable for you and that you're getting important stuff to take back with you. But in thinking about even our older learners, one thing we really need to ask ourselves is, do they have these three skills? I'll say mastered, but we're always kind of working on them and evolving. But do they have good foundations of these three skills? Because if they don't have solid foundations with these three pieces that we're going to talk about, you're not going to be able to get to those more advanced pieces of executive function, like goal setting and following through on goals. So I would always encourage you to go back and assess whether or not these pieces are actually working and firing correctly. So this is a wonderful, fun little assessment if it worked. It's there was a website called cognitivefun.net, and I tried to access it on my phone. I tried to pull it back up on my laptop, and it is not working. So I really wanted us to try a couple of different activities to look at what inhibition might look like in the sense of like an assessment piece, like how a psychologist would go about assessing inhibition. That way we could look at it from a very clinical standpoint and then talk about how that transfers into the classroom. The Erickson flanker test is one of the most popular types of assessments that you can look at when it comes to inhibition. Typically, it's a set of arrows, and all of the arrows are pointing the same way, except maybe one. Maybe the center arrow is pointing a different direction than the rest of the arrows, and then you would click or somehow signal that that one was different. If someone can find this back on the internet, I would be forever grateful. I just, in the few minutes Alana and I had, the website just is not working. So I tried to go back and find another version of it, and I couldn't find it. Another is like assessment style or assessment option that we use when we look at inhibition is something called the Stroop test. It's STROOP. OOP. And there are several different Stroop tests that you can find online to use even with your students. And I just know for next time I need to check those links the day before. I thought, man, 2 weeks out, our links should be good to go, right? Obviously, I learned my lesson on that. But the Stroop test is one that I know there are multiple different websites out there that use the Stroop test. But I just did a quick little snip and share on this slide with you so that we could talk about what the Stroop test is. And so the Stroop test asks the examinee to do a couple of different things before we progress to something harder. So an example might be to show a student a card that looks like this and ask the student to say the color, or rather, we could even start with read the word first. And so maybe all the words in the actual assessment would start out black. And so the student is just reading each of the color words and everything's in black ink. And then, then you time it, and then you turn the page, and on the next page, things look a little different. You maybe ask the reader or the examinee to read the color words, but this time the color words are in the color that they say. So the word red is in red, yellow is in yellow, blue would be in the color blue, and so on. So again, it's a fairly easy task because the color the word is written in matches the color in which it is written. So then you do that. So then the next progression is to say the color that a word is written in, but not read the word. And so you could see this example in really it starts in the second column, how the word yellow is written in green. And so there's a distraction that's been created. And so then you time that, and then there's this whole calculation that you can see if you're statistically different on your inhibition processing. Really fun activities to do. I will say kids love to do these different types of activities because they're always trying to beat their times. And there are a lot of websites that will do these where they are trained, or they are timed. And so kids can practice and get much better at it. And by practicing, what they're really doing is they're getting rid of distractions around them and really concentrating on what the task is asking. So those were supposed to be some fun games that we were going to try, and I am so sorry that we can't do that today. So let's jump in and look at inhibition. And inhibition goes by a few different names. So if you look at any website or research study or article, the word inhibition might be used a lot of different terms, but they all mean the same thing. So inhibition can also be referred to as inhibitory control, response inhibition, cognitive inhibition, and impulse control. And we're going to talk about some of these terms, but in the chat, just kind of throw out some of the words that you're familiar with when you think about inhibition, and just what you're most familiar with. As we think about the different skills in the concept of inhibition today, I just want to remind you that in our first session, we talked a lot about how executive function skills are dependent upon the context in which we're using them. And so an executive function or executive dysfunction is about a mismatch or a match between a person and their environment. So between a person and what they're being asked to do. And this is very important because we're separating really what a person is able to do from the person. And that's so important, right? It's just like when we talk about, like if we were going to say to a student that what they are doing is disruptive, we're going to say, you know, every time you break pencils, you are disruptive. We're not going to say you're a disruptive student, right? We're going to take that language off of them and we're going to apply it to the action. That's kind of what we want to do with executive function skills as well when we look at them as a whole. I'm not a bad goal setter. I just struggle when I try to set goals related to anything that has to do with the classroom, because people can set goals for things that they really care about, and they can usually set those pretty easily. So I can see in the chat, resisting distractions. Yes, I love that. Impulse control, lots of impulse control in there. Okay, so when we look at inhibition, we of course going to give you a kind of like a book definition, but inhibition is that ability to suppress automatic responses and do what is more appropriate or needed. So I want to say that again. Inhibition is the ability to suppress automatic responses and do what is more appropriate or needed. So inhibition is really two steps. We have to suppress and then do something that's more acceptable. So we have a couple of different types of inhibition that we are dealing with every single day. So the first is what we would call response inhibition. So on this previous slide where we had response inhibition, if that's something that you have been familiar with, you can now add to your memory that response inhibition is also called behavioral inhibition. And this refers to things that we would do behaviorally. So it's resisting an automatic impulse that's often referred to as self-control. And so when we think about behavioral inhibition in a classroom, that might be something like raising your hand before you blurt out an answer. Or it might be suppressing a joke when it just comes to your mind during an instructional time. It could be whispering to your friend because something just popped into your head and you didn't want to forget about it. If you can think of other types of behavioral inhibition that you see in the classroom, please feel free to throw some of those in the chat. So when we look at resisting those automatic impulses, those are those automatic urges that we have to act on something physically. So we're wanting to do something. And then we have attentional inhibition. So this is referred to as cognitive inhibition. And this refers to the ability to tune out irrelevant stimuli. And this is something that we refer to as interference control. So it's that interference control of things that's happening in our mind. So when we look at inhibition on the surface, inhibition seems like a really simple thing, but the reality is that inhibition is very complex. And when we break it down into the different types, it gets even more complex because behavioral inhibition is going to look at resisting an automatic impulse and doing something differently. And attentional inhibition is going to be the ability to tune out something that's distracting us and stay focused on the task at hand. So this might be like if another student is fidgeting and we see it out of the corner of our eye, can we not focus on that and stay on what we're doing? Or if there's a window in the classroom and another class is out at recess and I can see students swinging, but I'm taking a test, can I stay focused on the test? So think about some of those and throw some of those into the chat. Alana, any examples of
Yeah, there's
responses?
examples and there's some questions also.
Yeah.
Um, um, Anjay asked if would it be making noises while the teacher is teaching. She was probably she was talking about um, before, and then would interruption be one as well, like interrupting?
Yes, I would say yes to both of those.
Yes, I agree. And then
When we
there's some,
talk about our kiddos with ADHD and it's like their motors are going, right? They're going and they're doing things and they don't even have any idea. They cannot suppress that.
yes, yeah, and I was saying like pushing a student when you want to get their attention, like just to talk to them instead of like waiting for the appropriate time. So you're kind of like you see students like they don't mean to push them, but they want them to interact with them, so they do it in a different way. Yes. Yep, and the
And
ability to keep working when the principal and another adult walks into the classroom, Marissa, that's a good example of what Katie was just talking about. And if you have a co-taught classroom, if you're in stations and students are able to kind of focus on the teacher versus what the other people are doing in the class, that would be another example of what Katie was just referring to as well. You can filter out those distractions and figure out what your task is and work on that. So those are some examples, Katie. Great job in the chat, guys.
for sure. And some of those examples make me think of a strategy that I don't think we put in this. So I wrote it down in my notes so that I can be sure to mention it when we get to that strategy section for sure. All right. So inhibition, when we think about when inhibition develops, how it develops and all that good stuff, because you guys know I'm going to tell you that because in our first training, we talked about how some of these early skills start to form and develop. And it's so important to know how they develop and when, because it helps us understand executive function on a different level. And we know that when we understand it at a deeper level, then we can be better facilitators for our students and intervene when appropriate. So when we think about inhibition, it has to be the first executive function that develops. It's like the foundation. We have to get that down. Um, it has to develop so that we can learn to ignore irrelevant stimuli in our environments. That way we can start to learn problem solving. We have to figure that out. And it's going to continue to develop as situations and context become more and more complex. So if we see kiddos who have never had to solve problems on their own in first, second, third grade, inhibition is going to be increasingly difficult for them because through problem solving, we become stronger in our ability to inhibit. Kids really start to see success with inhibition around age 4. And so this comes a lot through play. So many of these executive function skills, the foundational pieces, are learned during play. A lot of schools have started to build in purposeful play times in elementary, where they are very structured play times to try to help students develop some of these executive function skills. If any of you guys are in early childhood areas, I would love to know if you are doing some sorts of purposeful play to try to help set the foundation for some of these skills. But by age 4, kids should, I'll say should, be able to do what we call inhibit plus alternative response. So if you think about what this might look like, it could be students who are playing and one student is playing with a train or even child, let's go just on a play level here. Some kids are playing, some are playing with trains and they're playing with the trains and another child is playing with some blocks, and the kiddo who has the blocks decides, you know what, I want to play with the train. So I'm going to go over and play with the train, but it's not their turn and another student or another child has the train. Can the child be okay with going back to the blocks, knowing that they'll get to the trains later? And sometimes kids can't do this. When we talk about kids, it always has to be their way, right? They always have to get what they want. They haven't mastered this skill yet. They haven't been able to master the alternative response with the inhibition. It's like, this is what I really want. I really want to just go and take all of those trains from you and play with them myself. But I know I can't. So I'm going to still want that, but I'm going to make the alternate choice and play with the blocks like I know I'm supposed to. Final maturation of inhibition occurs around age 21. And that's so crazy to think about, that you start developing it from birth, really. You're starting to lay out those neural pathways, and it doesn't really become solidified until after the age of 21.
There was a question in the chat. Did you see it, Katie?
Nope, I
What
sure didn't.
Okay, what if a student doesn't play, like he just walks around the room and that would be during indoor recess, like he's not really interested in that?
So I'm just curious, what age are we talking about? Did it say?
It didn't say, Jay. It's probably harder to learn those, right? If they're not interested in the toy, like do you think that they have to be interested in what the other person is doing to learn that?
For sure. They have to have interests of some sort. So I'm not sure like what age group, but I
Oh,
will.
kindergarten. She said kindergarten.
Okay. So that could be several things.
Mhm.
I would be curious. It's like, I wish we could just answer a question with a straight answer, but it's like nothing can be answered with a straight answer. It's like, I would want to know what else is going on. Does the kiddo have some social developmental delays? Because that can contribute to it as well. But it could look like that. And maybe a child doesn't know how to play, especially if a child has been raised on a tablet and they've never been in a play-based situation where you're playing with other kids and other toys. You might have to show them how to play. And so you might have to say, hey, come sit with me. We're going to play with these cars. This is, we're showing them how to play with cars. For some of our kids, they need that. When we think too about inhibition with our older students, and especially in Indiana right now with the passing of like the cell phone law, and I know districts and schools have kind of set their own policies. I believe that was the law that the district had to create a cell phone policy. So I know a lot of districts are going with a policy of they don't want to ever see it, like you cannot see it. And so for some of our kids, they might have their phone to where the adults can't see it, but they might have it on vibrate. So what's happening when that phone vibrates in their pocket? That's an inhibition. Are they able to forget about that distracting buzz and continue on the task that they're doing? Or do they become so distracted by the buzz that they can't focus on their task? And I would even challenge us as adults. Sometimes I do this with myself anyway. I stopped wearing an Apple Watch so that I couldn't respond to things on it. So it worked out better anyway. I'm a runner, so I prefer Garmin. So I wanted a Garmin where I couldn't respond to anything. So I got a Garmin watch, which I like, but I still get updates on it. So it will still buzz. And sometimes when it buzzes, I tell myself, don't look at it, don't look at it. And it's like something that even at 46 years old, I'm still trying to train my brain to tune out that buzzing, because we have been inundated with buzzes and dings and all kinds of timers and notifications. I know that like as I'm going through this presentation, I have to have my volume on so that you all can hear me, which means I don't know how to turn off my computer background sounds and still make it so that you could hear me. And so every time I get an email, I can hear it. And it's like, can I tune that out? So even as adults, this is something we struggle with, even though, I mean, I'm just barely over 21, but it's still developing in me. Oh, Bill didn't even smile. Leslie smiled, I think, at that one. So did Stephanie. That's okay. I got 2 out of the 3 faces I can see right now. But think about, if you're learning a new task, so if the teacher is presenting new content and you have that distraction, that's going to be tough. Because we're going to talk about here in a little bit how we have 3 seconds to commit something to memory. And if we miss out on that 3 seconds, it's going to be a whole lot harder to get that into memory. So here are just some of the challenges. You guys have already mentioned some of these. We've already talked about a few of them. The ones that we haven't talked about, some of those emotional responses, like slamming a laptop shut or throwing something down out of frustration. A lot of that has to do with the inability to suppress how you feel, and you behaviorally act out on that feeling. Elopers, they struggle with inhibition. Some of you might wear tennis shoes to work every day because you know that little Cameron is going to make a run for it every single day. And you might have to chase him down 2 or 3 different hallways or secure a doorway. And he's just still trying to work on that inhibition. Risk taking is also a big piece of inhibition challenges, and this is where it kind of becomes a pitfall for some of our older learners, even college students. When we look at risk taking behaviors, those freshmen, sophomore, they are more apt to do something risky than an older adult would be. And if there's anything else that you can think of that comes to mind, feel free to throw those suggestions or thoughts in the chat as well. And Alana's manning the chat. That way I'm not distracted by those. So I'm thankful for that.
No, and when I was thinking about the inhibition, and I have a couple of strategies, but I think maybe I'll wait for that. The chat, though, there are people that are writing some things. Carrie put, is it possible that a child never has can master inhibition and goes into adulthood? Like it matures because they're not, or is it just at a slow rate?
It's a really great question.
It is, yes.
I think that, again, it's going to be context dependent. And I think some people will not find success in like a school setting with inhibition, but they might find success with it in a work environment of some sort.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good answer.
I don't know that that's a good answer, but
I think it's a good
that's
answer.
what I think of. So when we think about inhibition and performance, and we think about academic success, so I guess this kind of goes along with that. Our students who find academic success who find academic success and seem to have mastered some parts of inhibition are those who can stay on task and tune out some of those distractions that are happening, whether they be environmental, like outside the classroom, inside the classroom, or some of those cognitive distractions that they might be facing. It for sure affects work efficiency. So procrastination is big when we think about inhibition. So if you're a procrastinator, inhibition might be something that you know that you struggle with a little bit. And then the social appropriateness, that's just managing behaviors in group settings. It's like those kids who can't keep their hands off of other kids. They don't see very many successes sometimes when they're in a group of people who don't want to be touched. So thinking about just different social cues, people who might say, I'm socially awkward, or I never know how to behave in a social situation, has to do with some pieces of inhibition. All right, so we're going to jump into the strategies and intervention piece. And I will, before we jump into all of these different pieces, say that is going to be a lot of content over the next few slides. And some of the content and strategies will be found in later presentations, because some of the strategies that we're going to talk about are just good stuff that will help in many different contexts and many different situations. And some of it's going to be kind of new. So as we go through some of these different strategies, ask questions if you have them, if you want further explanation, if we did a bad job explaining something, if it's not clear, please ask for clarification. We just want to help you out any way that we can with some of this. So before I flip to the next slide, I want to talk about one strategy that I know is not on this, and it had to do with blurting out answers. And there's a really great strategy called, I think it's just called like giving your 2 cents. And so this is probably going to work better with younger learners. And we all know we want to get our 2 cents in to a conversation, right? Most of us tend to want to contribute to a conversation. Some over contribute, some under contribute. And so when you're working with a small group of students or even a whole group of students, give each student 2 pennies. They can be real pennies. They can be just like printed off pennies, however you want to do it. And each student has 2 pennies on their desk. And so for whatever the given conversation is, kids can only give their 2 cents. And so each time they say something or contribute something, you take a penny from them. And then they can't contribute again until everyone else has also given their 2 cents.
I did that also with like Skittles, if the kids could use them because they would like to eat the Skittles or like some candy. But I did the same thing. And I taught middle school, and they like it because and when you're holding them accountable in group work, they all have to contribute and they can give you their 2 cents. That exactly what Katie said. But I've used like small things like little Skittles so they can just eat them when they're done. But they have to hold off until, or Jolly Ranchers or something like that. So you could adapt it. But yes, that is a great strategy, Katie. I love that.
I love how you made it applicable to older learners, because little kids, I think, get excited about the thought of 2 pennies, whether they're fake or real, but older learners would much prefer candy, like little things like that. I like that idea. Okay, so when we think about long-term memory, because memory is important when it comes to executive function, information not stored in long-term memory within 30 seconds is lost. So we have 3 seconds to activate memory. And then if it's not stored within 30 seconds, we're going to lose it. So when we think about that, how can that affect how we teach and interact with students? And so you can think about this from like in relationship to strategies and interventions that we might use with students, or even new content that we're trying to teach. Before we let everybody in, Alana and I were having a conversation about getting things stored to long-term memory and going back to a book and trying to versus trying to remember it and storing it. My cat is being.
And Bill just said that you give small bits of information at a time, which is a great strategy for students. Yes, chunking that information.
Yep, and we will see chunking on here in a little bit. So Bill's an overachiever. And he's laughing at that. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm not sure. Bill, Leslie, and Stephanie, do you all know each other? No. Okay. Oh, that makes it even better. Okay. So if our students are distracted by something, and we know they only have 30 seconds to commit that to long-term memory, then we're going to see some issues when they're distracted. So really, as we go through some of these inhibition strategies, we really want to keep the big question of how can we limit distractions, as my cat is wagging her tail in my face, right? But really, we've got to limit those distractions in order to get things committed to memory. All right, so with our young learners, so preschool, kindergarten, first grade, and really, I think you guys know your learners, so you know if certain types of things would work well with them or not. But games that are called go, no-go games are really good for working on inhibitory skills with young learners. So this is something like Simon Says, because when we give a command and we're playing a game, we want to do it, right? Because we want to perform the action because we want to win. But the trick with Simon Says is that we can only perform the action when Simon says it. And so we've got this piece of stimuli, and we have to weed out, did Simon tell us we could do this or not? And then we act on it. And so it's so hard. It sounds so easy, but really it's difficult. I think that kids of any age would enjoy Simon Says. I mean, I think you could probably adapt this to a lot of different situations in classrooms and small groups to make the game fun. But it really causes kids to stop and think. And if you're distracted while playing Simon Says, you are not going to do very well at all. So if your mind starts to wander, or if your phone buzzes, or if something catches your eye, you're going to struggle with Simon Says. Red light, green light is another great game. The student who has to take that extra step or two when you say red light, they're the ones who are going to struggle with inhibition. This is a great game that you could play in like those first few days of school. You could learn a lot about your student without ever asking them a question in a game like this. Any sort of freeze game, when we think of freeze games, we think of most often like freeze tag, but we could even do a freeze dance, right? Play a song, as soon as it stops, you're frozen in whatever dance action you are doing. So there are some different adaptations of some of those freeze style games. So what all three of those games are doing is asking a participant to stop doing something, to stop doing some behavior that would have otherwise been automatic. Because if you're dancing, you're going to keep dancing normally. But if that music stops, you're done anyway. So that's the benefit of adding in some of those different games. If you can think of another go, no go game, feel free to throw it in the chat. I would love to add things to the presentation, things that we haven't thought of or haven't been able to find. Another big help for inhibition is the use of visual aids, and visual aids can be useful with a lot of different executive functions. Different types of visual aids are better suited for different areas. So when we are looking at strictly inhibition, we might think of stop signs. Those are really good for students. It's a nice visual cue. And the thing about visual aids is that they are less intrusive than like a verbal prompt. So we're not drawing attention, we're not distracting a whole class by saying something out loud. A visual is so subtle because it could be something that we point to, or maybe something we show a student on their desk. And so visual cues and aids are what we would hope to go with.
Can I,
You're muted, Alana.
sorry,
Oh,
this is where my strategy kind of fits in. I was at a school recently and I thought it was genius. There was a couple of elopers in the building and they had a yellow on every, not just in the door of the school, but even outside for in the hallway, like going onto the playground. They had like a yellow and it was made it was like a breakaway material. So there was a stop sign, like Katie was saying, in the middle, and it was covered, but it covered every in every classroom, like just that stop, but it had like, so you could break away. You can get like, you can go in and out of it pretty easily. But just that, they said, has reduced the elopers going out into the playground, and it was very dangerous. A couple of kids got away. It was a primary building, K through 5, and so just having those throughout the building, not just in one classroom, but every classroom had it in the whole school, and they had it on their doors going out into like the parking lot. Um, that it has helped with that eloper, because you could just have to take a minute to think about that stop sign. You don't have to say anything. The student's running away, and then you looked at it, and then he didn't go that way. So that was just a thought, and I thought that was great for a building. If you guys have some kids like that, that it's throughout the school. I have not seen that before. I see it sometimes in different classrooms, but it was kind of a strategy that the whole school used, and it has helped with that.
that's a really great strategy. I like that one. Um, I was just gonna see, quickly flipping through my notes. Okay. Um, so stop signs. Cue cards are also really good with our students. Um, visual timers, another really good thing. Our students really don't understand time. I'm sure that's not a surprising statement, and you're probably like, I could have told you that. But so anything that we can do to help them visualize time will be effective. And we'll talk about time in a couple other, or our next 2 trainings as well. But students do not understand the concept of time and need help with that temporal awareness, that temporal space, like time, space, continuum. And we have to show that to them. Even in our older learners, when we think about timelines with them and extended timelines, we think, well, we can give them a week deadline. But the truth is we can't. They cannot think that far in advance. Even our most advanced high school students, research shows us, can only think about 3 days ahead of time. And so giving a lot of visual cues and visual support through the use of time and clocks is important. Any graph or chart that we can use might be beneficial. And some of these will work with some kids, some will not work with them. It's unfortunately some trial and error with a few of these. Posters, physical objects, sometimes hand signals will work as well. I know I'm in a building where they talk about how they have level 0 in the hallway, and so the kids will have to walk with like a level 0. And I always chuckle to myself when I'm in that building and I see the child with the level 0 they're holding it up. They're doing such a good job showing level 0 on their hand, but they're still talking to their neighbor. It's like, okay, we've got to work on some things there. We're not making that connection that level 0 means that our mouths are closed as well. All right, so when we think about impulse control, this website will probably, the videos will be more beneficial for adults working with younger learners, but this has a lot of videos that help to teach children about self-control and impulse control. I looked at a few of the videos. They were pretty juvenile, but there was some information for older kids in there, not necessarily videos, but different pieces of information that I thought might be helpful. You can scan the QR code, and remember, this QR code will be in the Padlet, in that PowerPoint, the second PowerPoint. But I think what I might do also is link the website in the resources tab, which is like 3 over from the presentation, just so that you don't have to go into the PowerPoint to find it. But the website, I really liked it. I thought it had some great valuable content in it. It was from a website from it was called Whole Child Counseling. So just the whole website looked really cool and had a lot of beneficial information in it. So I wanted to pass that along to those of you who might be struggling with some of these areas, or maybe you have the opportunity to work with students in small groups. Maybe you're doing an intervention group or a social group on impulse and self-control. You might find some benefit to some of the things on this website if you are in need of those. So when it comes to strategies and interventions that really stick, it's not so much as important as the type of intervention as to the method in which you are using. And that goes back to good teaching strategies. And so my training webinars are starting to run together. And I know I'm pretty confident, we have not talked about John Hattie and efficacy when we talk about these strategies. And if you're unfamiliar with John Hattie, I would encourage you to familiarize yourself with him. But he did a bunch of research to basically tell us what strategies work best with our students that promote learning. So what strategies can we use in classrooms that will be most beneficial to help our students learn? One of the top things that we can do is using explicit instruction. Oftentimes, many educators think that only our students with disabilities need explicit instruction, and that is so false. We all need explicit instruction, no matter how sometimes we want to try not to be explicit for whatever reason. Research tells us that being explicit and direct is going to give us the most bang for our buck. So explicit instruction is going to be guided, repeated, and have varied examples provided for our students. So we are specifically telling them what to do. We are guiding them as a whole group. So we're going to do it together. You're going to do, or I'm going to do it. Actually, I'm going to do it. And then we're going to do it together. And then you're going to do it, so that I do, we do, you do strategy is going to be beneficial. Students with deficits can lose ground when the instruction is not structured and explicit. So this is important to remember, that students who are already maybe seeing some non-successes are going to be the learners at greatest risk when we're not using these direct, explicit instruction techniques. When we think about our most vulnerable groups of learners, there are two who we need to consider. One is students who are new to a structured classroom, and that could be for a lot of different reasons. Maybe it's just they're new to kindergarten, or they're new to preschool and they've never done school before. Or maybe it could be a homeschool child who's going to public school for the very first time. I know as a middle school teacher, I was surprised how often I would get a homeschool student in 7th grade who had never been in school before. And so that direct, explicit instruction, especially of the rules for school and the school handbook, were so important. We just had to be much more explicit than what we ever thought we needed to be with a middle schooler, just because they had never done school before. They don't know that you have to ask to leave the classroom. It's something new to them. So those students, and then our multilingual learners, also need very direct, explicit instruction. This is for a lot of reasons. One is that our learners who are learning English as their second language may not have a mastery of some more of the figurative skills and figurative language skills that our other learners do. So it's important that we not make assumptions and we not leave gaps in those most important pieces of our instruction, whether those be academic or behavioral or social pieces of instruction. And then I'm not sure about you guys in your districts. Feel free to comment because this would probably be helpful in guiding some of our future discussions. But I know in districts in just the area where I live, we're seeing a lot of learners coming to us who have, the last week they were in a different country and they've never been in an American school before. And so they're trying to acclimate to a new country, to a new environment, and to a new way of doing school. I had to learn a lot about our multilingual learners who are coming to us as first-time American students. And I'll say American classroom students. Let me say it that way. Especially in one district I was in, there's a large population of Haitian Creole students. And so I didn't know that in Haiti, education was such a it was just something that kids do not get. I didn't know that. It was for the very elite students. And so when a district had this high influx of students from Haiti, we were really looking at what was causing a lot of these missing pieces going on in the classroom, aside from the fact that they're in a new environment in a new country. A lot of it was the fact that they had never been in a school setting, period. And so they didn't understand what that was like. And I couldn't imagine being 10 years old in a brand new country, in a brand new school environment that I had never been in before, that had a lot of structure, and I'd never been used to that structure before. And so through that structure, executive function skills are going to develop. And so that's another reason why we need to have this direct explicit instruction. Alana, any comments or anything
Yeah,
in the
people were
chat?
somebody was sharing a book that they really liked about how to teach behavior, teach expectations, so that they shared it with their book. They said the first 6 weeks of school from responsive classroom. So Leslie shared that one. She really enjoyed the strategies out of there. So it's helpful to use that chat to learn from. And if anybody has any other strategies that you like or any books or things that have worked for you, but teaching that explicit instruction, I think as Katie said, especially for classroom like management, after winter break, after spring break, all those breaks, you have to kind of teach again what does it look like to walk in the hallway. I know that they're supposed to know it by these certain times, but we almost have to pretend like they have to see it so often. It's just good practice to keep practicing to do that again. So just that part.
For sure, because what happens, and so when we say like our kids should know how to line up or they should know how to do this, what happens is that our brain, when we don't do a skill or practice a skill, our brain starts to prune it away. Because our brain is like, we haven't used this piece of information in a while, so I want to get rid of it so that I can make room for new information. And so our children's brains, our students' brains are constantly pruning that information. And so that's why if we're not practicing a skill, then we're going to lose it. And so practicing those when we get back from breaks, again, super beneficial, just like Alana said. So this is just an additional slide on explicit instruction. So the previous slide just kind of hinted on it rather. This slide right here is from Terrence Scott and Todd Whitney. They are wonderful, wonderful instructors on all things really related to behavior. And when we think about it, and this information is pulled from their work. So when they talk about that that explicit instruction and really talking with our students about the why they're learning something, we really have to connect that to them. It's just the ability of the student to be engaged as an active learner. And we know that if students are not actively engaged, then they're not going to be able to take in that information and then be able to apply it, which is what we're hoping for, and generalize it out. So students must also have the opportunity to receive feedback on their performance. So as we're practicing something, whether it be a rehearsal of an old skill or just a drill and kill of a new skill, we need to give them feedback on, yes, you got it. Even if they're getting things right over and over and over, we need to reaffirm them that, yes, they're getting it right. Because overall, our feedback needs to be largely positive. That's one thing that their research really shows, is that students need at least 3 pieces of positive feedback for every 1 negative piece of feedback, but it helps to build that student confidence and really increase that probability of success. And feedback is always after you give the instruction. So be direct and explicit with the instruction, and then we want to give that feedback during those practice times. Alana, anything you want to add to that explicit instruction piece?
No, I think you did a great job on that one. Thanks.
Okay. So next is repeated practice. And so we talk a lot about this in our world, right? We've got to repeat, repeat, and repeat. So let's go back to being like a kindergartner. Pete and repeat, we're sitting in a boat. Pete fell out. Who was left? Repeat, Pete and repeat, right? We could go on and on and on and on with that. So it's just really important that we are, just really repeating that information, even to the point where we think we've said it too much just for our learners. Also, the more we repeat and the more we give feedback and the better the confidence levels of our students increase, that's when we're hopefully leading to independence of skills, and that's what we really want. Let's see, mental rehearsal of tasks. So this is just like creating some self-awareness with our students. So really promoting that if-then thinking. So this goes into that thinking and situational awareness. So walking students through, if I do X, then Y is going to happen. And so we can help think through a lot of different possibilities. If I study for this test, then I'll probably get a better grade because I'll probably know the content better. Or, if I hit this child for taking my toys, then I'm going to get in trouble. What could be a better alternative response? And so we can practice some of those. We can do that in whole group and small group. Things like show and tell me. So instead of just telling kids, like, go get your backpack for the end of the day, say, show me and tell me, what you're going to do. Let them practice it and show you what they look like. We have to remember that task planning often happens in a different space from where we actually execute the plan. So we can talk about homework with a student, right? We can sit at the desk. We can say, when you go home to do homework, you're going to do this, this, and this. And so we're preparing them to do a task that's in a different environment from where we're actually planning it. So the execution piece is going to be somewhere else. So keep that in mind. And so when we're giving our kids multi-step directions in class, like if they're sitting at their desk and we're saying, all right, I want you to get your notebook, pencil, and go to the carpet. They have to remember things to do. We're asking them to plan while they're at their desk to execute a task that's in a different location. So some of those visual cues are going to come in handy in this situation. We might have a pencil and a notebook in our hands as we're saying this to them, or we might have a picture of them at the carpet time. We can do this with our older learners as well. And most of our older learners have their own devices. So when we think about if they're going to hopefully go home, take their device home and do an assignment, we have what like a finished product is going to look like or something like that. Just really increasing those skills. Do some freeze points and share a plan. So as you're thinking through something with your class, say, all right, freeze. At this point, tell me what you're thinking. This can be applied through, a math class when they're thinking through a problem. It could be through a question about maybe what's a theme in a book. As you get them to think about characters and setting and say, okay, now stop and think about how that affects theme. You could do this in small groups, social skills, give a social situation. Okay, here's what happens. Let's freeze. Let's talk about what our plan could be. And then any sort of think aloud strategies where we're thinking through things with our students and we're practicing modeling our thinking will be beneficial as well. So there's a whole lot of information on that slide. Any comments, Alana, anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I was thinking about you guys and everybody out here in the audience. So think about what you're going to do tonight after this chat. Just think about it really quick and put it in your chat. Like think about it for a couple seconds. What happens in your brain when you think about this? Can anyone put that in the chat? Like if I'm like, okay, what are you going to do after Katie and I get off with you today and you guys did something in your brain? What flashed through your head? I'm just curious if anybody wants to share it out. Go look. Yep. Okay. All right. So visualize and prioritize. Perfect. So everybody had visualized it. Yes. Everybody saw a little picture. And that's what executive functioning is. It's being able to see a little picture. And the more specific you are with the details, the better your executive functioning can be. So this is how you could practice it. A lot of the students do not have these pictures going on in their brain. So that is why we have to do our think aloud for them to kind of see how we think about that. Because for us, it's really easy. It comes very naturally to think about that. Okay, if you're going to go to the gym, I'm going to go get my red sweatshirt. I could see myself doing it in a couple of seconds. It doesn't take that long. But our students, and think about even our older, like our secondary students, they don't have those pictures in their brains yet. So that's what we're trying to work on with all of these kinds of things that Katie has talked about with these strategies. So the more that you can model that aloud and talk about your steps and the sequences and the priorities, that will help your students learn what those executive functioning are. So thanks, Katie.
Alana, thank you so much for adding that in. And the reason that Alana just gave is the reason why checklists often don't work for students. Because a checklist that I've created and given to a student means nothing to them. But a checklist that a student creates might mean something to them. Because if I gave my kid a list of things to go get at the grocery store, say I just wanted one thing, even say apples was on the list. When I write the word apple, I know exactly where Kroger has the apples. I know exactly the apple I want. I want a Honeycrisp apple. But my list just says apple because I knew exactly what I wanted when I pictured it. But when my kiddo goes into the grocery store, I don't even know that the one I have in mind. I don't even know that she'll figure out where the apples are. I don't know that she would know which side of the grocery store to go into, right? You go in like the freezer section or the produce section. And then the first thing she sees is an apple. She's just going to get an apple and not pay any attention to it. Well, that list meant something to me. It didn't mean anything to her. And so that's one thing we have to be wary of and cognizant of when we give our students checklist. Self-reflection and feedback. We've already talked a little bit about feedback, but just encouraging that flexible thinking. And when we talk with our learners, just watching how we phrase things instead of saying like, what could you do differently? Think about, saying you need to be more flexible, asking our kids, what could you do differently? Really shifting that emphasis from compliance to active engagement. A lot of times we think kids are learning when all they're really doing is being compliant. And we will often mistake compliance for learning. Really, we want our learners to know that the process is just as important as the outcome. I find this, or I found it when I was in the classroom, a big struggle with my high achieving students. They were more eager to be compliant and complete an assignment than to actually struggle through something difficult to learn something through the process. So just really helping our learners see that it's the process. The outcome is important, but how we get there is more important. Really looking at the environment first is going to help with inhibition. Are there distractions? Are the learners at ease? Are we promoting instructions in a manner that's clear, that's delivered in multiple modalities? So that's going to hit a little bit of the universal design for learning piece. Are timing demands appropriately developmentally appropriate for the age group we're working with? Can we find support materials? Do we have procedures for transitions? Are those practiced?
That's why sometimes when students have a hard time with lecture based, some of these things aren't there. You know, if thinking if you're a para or you're a teacher in their classroom and your student is having a hard time with these executive functioning, it's too much information at once. I think Bill talked about it earlier. How can we break that up and pair with visuals and make sure there's small things at a time? And that's what I think paraprofessionals are really good at, and you know, special education teachers too, to add those kind of accommodations for the students to support those executive functioning needs and those or so some strategies that we can help with in small group or resource or different times. But that's just, I wanted to add that before we end. Sorry, Katie.
No, you're great. All right, so that does wrap up. I can't believe we only have 10 minutes, but just a quick reminder, the eval on the left, and then I will share our contact information with you. And then we can just kind of open it up for questions, comments, anything that anyone wants to say. I am throwing the eval link in the chat.
And if somebody uses some of these strategies, we'd love for you to report back and tell us how it's working. If if you're thinking about, pulling some small groups or thinking about adding some visuals, or I'm sure you use them anyway, but think about some specific ones that you can use for your students. We would love to hear it. I always say, please email us or let us know if something worked or something didn't, or if you have something else, let us know what your resources are so we can expand our toolbox. The more tools we have in our toolbox, the better, as you know as teachers. So I do think that.
For sure.
And if not, you guys can of course go and you'll get your PGP points and things like that. But we just wanted to give you some time if you had any questions or any comments. Oh, the screen one more time. The
Oh, share my screen again.
Thank you, Kelly.
Is that the screen someone needed?
Maybe the eval one? Or they want to call us? Yeah, the eval. Thank you, Robin. Yeah, the eval. Katie, have you checked our inventory on our books so we could, or did
Yeah,
you already?
we can give another one away. Did you come
Okay,
up with a great strategy in selecting a winner?
I don't have a good strategy. This is just, um, let me see. Oh, we're going back. There's more messages in the chat.
Okay,
We'd consider avoidance as an executive function? Bill would like to know, Katie.
consider what? I'm sorry.
Avoidance as an executive function?
Yes, I think it goes in with procrastination.
I might have that problem sometimes. I think I have that. Oh yeah, you're right. Oh, put the eval link in the chat. Let's see.
Sorry,
Oh,
Katie. Maybe I want to add on to that. So avoidance in terms of the student possibly knows that they are not at the academic level of their peers. So they use avoidance to get out of doing the assignment or doing their homework, instead of kind of just sitting there not doing something or struggling through it in general?
Yeah, so in that situation, I think it's probably a learned coping skill. If there's anything that you can do to help with that, I'm not sure, like, that's like a whole separate training, but looking at really what the goal of the assignment is, what's the purpose of the assignment, and is there anything that you can do to fill in gaps so that they can still show something? Alana, do you have any suggestions in that?
I was just trying, I'm sorry, I was reading the chat too.
Oh,
I was
you're
trying
good.
to, oh, and then they wanted to know the name of the strategy with the colors. Is that the,
Oh,
the
the
one that you started,
Stroop test,
the Stroop, I'm sorry, the Stroop,
STROOP.
Stroop test? Yeah, I think the root cause, Bill, like that would be what we would figure out. The root cause is probably the, like Katie said, the coping, but it's the academic, they know that the academics isn't there, so they're trying to figure, they're shutting down, right? So that would be, and the skill you'd have to teach would be the academic deficits that they'd have to, that would be like if it was a behavior plan or something, not that you'd have a behavior plan for that, but maybe, you'd have to find the root cause of that. And because that does make sense, just to shut down and not have to worry about it. And the only thing that would help it, I think, would be giving them confidence to be able to do the task, whether it's scaffolding or differentiation or, to give that student confidence. But I think that's a great point, because could be executive functioning, it could be just like Katie said, coping, could be so many things. That one. Yeah. We're gonna pick, I mean, we know who signed in, so we'll have to figure out, and then maybe we should send them a book at like a, I don't know how to do this, Katie. This is stressing me out. She's stressing me out, my executive functioning. I'm gonna give one to everyone. Because I don't see numbers or anything, like I
All
don't.
right, I'll tell you what. Pick a
All right.
number for me, 1, 2, or 3.
Okay, 3.
Okay. All right. Now, oh, wait, no, 1 or 2.
Okay, 1.
Sorry. 1.
Yeah.
Okay, now pick a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, 5.
Okay. Pick a number 1 through 5.
3.
Okay, so that would be, oh goodness, if I say your name wrong, I am so sorry. Mashonda Chappelle or Chapel. So, that's 1. So we can do another one.
Okay.
You got to
So you're
pick a
doing like a
number
math
though.
equation.
I got it in my head. It's a
Okay.
system. Page 1 or 2.
Okay, 1.
All right.
Oh, she
1 through
won. So
5.
Mashonda, send us your email or your address, right? Her address that we will send you the book.
Yep. 1 through 5.
Okay, 1.
Okay. 2 through 5.
4.
Andrea Nicka.
I don't know what Katie just did, but she did a math equation over there and she's figured it out. So those 2 people can send us some mail. Okay, have fun at lacrosse, Bill. We'll see you next time, guys. Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate you. We like to see your faces. Thanks, Stephanie, Gloria, and
Yes.
Leslie. I can see your beautiful faces.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, I like everybody's faces. I'm sure they're beautiful behind there. And Sarah. Love it. Appreciate you guys. Thanks,
All
Katie.
right.
I gotta go
Thank
find
you,
out where my son
everyone.
is. Not sure where he is. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.